The Jewish story. This week's story from the Holocaust is taken from the book The Bravest Battle, the 28 Days of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, written by Dan Kurzman. April the 18th, the eve. The young man's thin, usually pale face was oddly alight as he savoured with his comrades the sanctity of their final moments together before the storm. The time we've been waiting for has come, he said in a calm, deliberate manner that could not mask his excitement. Mordechai Anielewicz, the 24-year-old commander-in-chief of the Jewish Fighting Organization, or Z.O.B, was briefing his commanders late in the afternoon in a shabby apartment at Zamenhof 32 in the central ghetto, amid the melancholy mementos of a family that had already been resettled. Mordechai flashed no brass buttons, no medals on his chest. He was in his customary battle dress, thread-worn grey jacket, knickers, and golf socks. But though he and his fighters were by no means polished soldiers, they were ready, Mordechai knew, for the next and final action. They had first suspected Nazi intentions 2 days earlier when First Lieutenant Karl Brandt, chief of the Gestapo's Jewish department in Warsaw, visited the ghetto and addressed the Judenrat, the Jewish community council that ruled the ghetto under the German orders. With his Roman nose, dark hair and swarthy complexion, Brandt looked more Semitic than Germanic, and he was as deceptive as his appearance. His deeply circled eyes, protruding under bushy brows, mirrored false anger as he ranted about the neglect of the ghetto children. They were not getting enough fresh air. Why could not the courtyard of the Judenrat building be turned into a playground where they could laugh and play? Nor were they eating enough vegetables. As for Passover, well, he would supply the ghetto with matzot. On this note of good cheer, Brandt departed with a smile on his fleshy face and the Jews only too familiar with Nazi perfidy, surmised that disaster would soon strike. Nevertheless, the ghetto bristled with the coming of Passover. Bakers plopped slabs of dough into the oven to bake matzot, while housewives lugged long hoarded bottles of wine from dank cellars and scrubbed concealed rooms and subterranean bunkers where most Jews were hiding. Seders, festive ceremonial dinners served on the first 2 nights of Passover, would be conducted mainly underground, and Z.O.B women would meticulously prepare one of the biggest dinners on the first night for the ghetto's Z.O.B political and cultural leaders. The Jews would celebrate the salvation of their ancestors in the midst of their own destruction. But then, on April 18th, a Jewish policeman, secretly working with the Z.O.B, rushed to Mordechai with the news that something would happen by the next morning, apparently confirming the suspicions aroused by Brandt's visit. Words later filtered through that SS troops and Polish police had begun mobilizing at 2 p.m. and had thrown a heavy cordon around the ghetto at about 6 p.m. The Seder for the ghetto leaders was abruptly cancelled and all underground fighters dashed to their posts. Now, at his final briefing, Mordechai assured his commanders, "We shall wear out the enemy by constantly attacking from behind the gates, windows, ruins, day and night. The basis of our plan is the ghetto labyrinth. The Germans will have to fight for months on end if we can get all the arms, ammunition and explosives we need. The enemy will pay with a sea of blood." Months on end, a Nazi sea of blood. Mordechai spoke as if this were to be a battle between 2 genuine armies. The commanders, who proudly wore pistols in their belts, about the only weapons they had, knew differently. But they revelled in the imagery of revenge and redemption. How sweet to die with a gun in hand, watching their murderers drown in their own blood. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising will be one of the first of its kind in history, an uprising doomed in advance to fail, to be crushed with surrender equivalent to death, even if, as Mordechai wishfully hoped, the revolt spread to the rest of Warsaw. An uprising that would flare in complete isolation, that would begin when and where the enemy wished, and could not be fueled by surprise. About 1,500 largely untrained Jewish fighters, most of them organized but some not, would face the fury of German tanks, artillery and machine guns, armed with only a few automatic weapons and rifles, some mines, several thousand grenades and Molotov cocktails, and a pistol per man. The Germans would have about 100 times their firepower in what might be the most uneven battle ever fought. Furthermore, since the fighters had only limited space for maneuvering in the ghetto and few possibilities for withdrawal to another battlefield, their strategic position could hardly be worse. But the Jews would enjoy two advantages, as reflected in Mordechai's words. The will to fight to the death. They could choose only the method of dying, and paradoxically the ghetto labyrinths, which, though a strategic curse, was a tactical blessing. Defenders manning key posts throughout this labyrinth, especially at intersections, could take a big enemy toll. At the same time, by knocking down attic walls in all defensible areas, the fighters had created an ingenious system of connected attics which would allow them to shift positions, retreat, or bring up supplies through the maze while being completely hidden from view. Please pass on this story.